we are live.
Thank you. I'd like to call a meeting to order. And so that, can we have adoptions of the meeting held on April the 6th? Is there any comments or additions or subtractions anybody wanted from in there?
No.
Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Tony?
Yep.
And Councillor Wise? All in favor? Approval of the agenda. I have a mover for that, Henry and Sam. All in favor? Thank you. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. I don't see any. So I'll move us to matters for consideration. Number one, the affordable housing needs assessment. And manager of social services is Scott.
Yes, hi everyone. So we've talked about this for a while, and so we decided to initiate a housing needs assessment for the entire Pellis region. And one of the things that we'll do is get that there'll be a subcategory for each member municipality. They'll just sort of spell out the housing needs in your particular area, but it will also paint a picture for housing needs across the whole area. I always think a housing needs assessment is a good idea to have, but it's also turning out to be a crucial piece or first step that's needed when applying for funds from the federal and provincial government. So not only is it a good thing to have, but it will put us in place that if funding opportunities come up in the future, we already have this key piece or this key document to add to that, but also will help inform us where we build, where we create, and add new affordable housing.
Okay, is there any questions? Councillor Wise.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Scott.
Hi, John. Or Councillor Wise, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I called you Scott. You can call me John. This is obviously something that we need to sort of have all our ducks in a row and so on. I was wondering though, in terms of the this what are they calling, the Housing Accelerator Fund? Is that it?
Yes.
Yeah, that we've decided not to participate in that. Is that just we wouldn't be ready, or what was the reasoning to not participate in that?
Well, the Housing Accelerator Fund, it's a one-time opportunity, and I think the deadline is some point in, I know it's some point in August, I'm not sure exactly, about mid-August, and a housing needs assessment is a crucial part to that. But the Housing Accelerator Fund is only open to municipal governments who basically are in charge of planning, and Pellis isn't that. So it would go to the lower tier governments, and it's a bit of an onerous application process. And it's not like you say you're going to build, 10 units and you apply for funding and they give you some money to build those 10 units. It actually it's encouraging, refinements in planning procedures. So if you've already got a subdivision planned, can you fit more units in there? Well, you can, but it would cost X amount of money to redesign that subdivision. So it will pay for those costs for redevelopment and things like that.
Okay.
I believe, and Mayor Ferguson can talk more about this if he wishes. I believe Prince Edward County is pursuing the Housing Accelerator Fund. But I'm in discussions with folks around Lennox and Addington. I think it's a little rushed and just too much work. I talked to Patricia Gray from Addington Highlands about it. And it seems like a lot of work unless you already have some subdivisions or housing in the works. It seems like a lot of work in hopes to get some new housing.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
Mayor Ferguson.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Just Scott, we very recently just passed our housing plan. Have you got a copy of that? Have you received
Yes.
a copy of that? Because it really does address the specific needs of Prince Edward County. So that bit of the work is already, I think, effectively done. And if the other members of the committee haven't yet received or seen our housing plan that Chuck Dowdall and his associate Ella Ziegler put together, I encourage you to read it on the county's website. It's very comprehensive and really does outline where we are and where we need to go. So the that bit of the work's already done. Any comment about that, Scott? Because we don't want to. We spent a great deal of time and money on what we've already done, and don't want to have to contribute again to a consultant to really do the same work.
Yeah, I know at Pellis we've been talking about this at the staff level since about February or perhaps March about doing something like this, and this was already in the process. And when the housing piece was done in Prince Edward County, and we decided to continue with Prince Edward County since it is the whole. We just wanted to catch the whole Pellis area. But if you wish us to take a different direction, we can certainly do that.
No, I just wanted, it's going to make the work that much easier because so much of it's been done. And as I say, Chuck has been a terrific resource in this as well.
Brenda?
Hi there. Scott, do you want to talk about the financial modeling pieces
Sure.
we've added into that, and just draw attention to that and explain that in more detail?
Yeah, we're looking at this to sort of say what we need now and what's needed in the future. And also what we're looking for is, I think it goes a little bit deeper in some respects in that we would hope to identify properties. And if you have a property that's X size, okay, we want the consultant to say, wow, well, you could fit 12 units on there. So in order to pay or cover the cost for these 12 units, we'd want them to do some financial modeling. So, they might recommend we get, we approach funding from a couple of different levels. You can get this much funding, which means you'd have this much of a mortgage, which means rents would need to be at this level to cover the ongoing operating costs over a long period of time. So we're kind of trying to get, I guess, a few ideas on the table where we could say, here's a chunk of property that will fit 12 units. This one can fit 4. This one can fit, 18 or something like that. So that we've got these models, and the hope is sometimes when government funding comes out, it's like, here it is. You have to respond really quickly, and it has to be built within 2 years. And if you start looking at property at that point and considering how you'll get the financing, you're already a few months behind on a tight timeline. So our hope is that we'll have some of that already kind of at the ready and ready to respond to financial assistance programs from the province and feds when it comes available.
Councillor Fish?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah. Yes, Scott. I realize we're not at the same stage as Prince Edward County, and that's fine. This looks like a great initiative. My question here is, there's a couple areas. One is in section 4 and one is in section 6. One is that you're looking sort of doing a search for properties, and the other one is community consultation. So my question here is, how are we sort of getting linked into the community in general during this study? Is it sort of thought to be targeted people, or is it going to be open houses or public meetings, or what's being thought about?
Yeah, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, to Council Fritsch. Yeah, the idea is they will be talking to each township office and key people there, talking to counselors, probably identifying kind of key informants, so people who would be thought of in the community as having valuable knowledge, but also having open community consultations, talking to people about what they envision either being built or what they probably more so what they envision being the need. You know, we need more family housing, or we need some 1-bedroom units to look after all the single people, or we need housing that people can easily transition from home ownership as they age into maybe more of a supportive environment as they aren't able to look after that housing. Or, you know, probably something to do with addressing homelessness, affordable housing, and maybe even affordable home ownership. So those are some of the things we expect, but we expect kind of to identify key informants, but also just to have wide open community consultations. I'm guessing, but most likely some sort of public survey, so that people that can't attend the meeting can still have their say and be an informed participant.
Great, thank you. Can I have a follow-up question?
Sure, yeah.
Brad? So that's great, Scott. Thank you. And so when you actually were doing property searches, I realize the lower tiers or the staff at lower tiers are certainly well aware of all of the property that their respective township may own, and possibly what private people may own. But will that be part of this sort of search or liaison with the community, that there may be private property owners that are just sort of sitting there in the bushes with ideas in their mind, or even properties they have, or property, someone else's property, or ideas on properties that maybe nobody's thought about? And will that opportunity be there for community input for someone who wants to provide that type of input on ideas?
Oh, definitely. And I get contacted about once a week from somebody in the community that has a great idea and they're looking for us to partner with. The problem is we don't have money to partner with. So we aren't able to partner with them. I was just contacted by about 3 weeks ago by a person developing over 100 units in Prince Edward County, who always does an affordable housing component with any of their builds. And of course, he's looking for either a capital contribution or rent supplements, and we don't have any of those right now. So hopefully this will lead us to building up what we need. But yeah, I anticipate more than a few people from the private world coming forward and saying, hey, I've got this piece of property, and wouldn't it be great if we built something?
Okay. Thank you.
Len?
Sorry, if I could just jump on here. So back several months ago when this all started too, it was mentioned that Prince Edward County was needing an assessment as well. So, and since then we've learned that they've already done a housing needs assessment, and that information can be rolled in, but really we're looking at a Pellis service area. But if Prince Edward County believes that what they have is sufficient, we don't have to include Prince Edward in the draft RFP for a housing needs assessment, but that information could be provided to the consultant as part of that package, if that's what committee chooses.
Okay. I have a couple questions. Oh, sorry. Sam, go ahead. Or Councilor Brandon Hurst, go ahead.
I was just going to let you ask your questions. I'm wondering if
go
they
ahead.
cross over. Oh, okay. My question is there any money saved if Prince Edward County bows out?
I can take that. I don't believe so.
okay.
I think,
Yeah.
sorry, Scott, the scope of work would remain the same. It would just include an additional piece of the area, but that information can be definitely provided to the consultant. And if there were gaps or anything at all like that, the consultant then could just look at what those gaps may be. But I don't think it would be any cost savings.
Thank you.
So I have a couple questions. Oh, sorry, Brenda, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Well, you're a counselor, you should go before me, but
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to raise the question of we would hate to not include the consultant's analysis, this needs assessment for Prince Edward County, and then find out later that what if what's been already done doesn't suffice for federal or provincial funding for what they're looking for in a needs assessment when they're giving out funding. So I'm just wondering that should, if at all we're not going to include it, it should be explored to see if what has currently been done suffices for government funding. We wouldn't want to be on the tail end of this and realize that it didn't meet the mark for what the feds or the province would consider for a full needs assessment, because if there was missing pieces. And as well, the full picture for us might help us because we have our own bricks and mortar that we maintain in all of these communities. And we need a full picture of data and information to make decisions, as you guys do as the committee that is responsible for what Pellis does. It's separate from, it complements what locals are doing, but you have your own bricks and mortar that you're responsible for in terms of RGI, and just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. So I have a couple questions if I could ask. I'll put them, kind of ask them both at the same time, maybe. I guess the first question is, and we always ask this, and affordable housing, they say in Prince Edward County is, I think, 375,000, which I don't really think is affordable due to the wages being paid in Prince Edward County. Young people can't afford that working for minimum wage in Prince Edward County. So the question is, what is affordable housing? If you could give us a definition, I don't know what it would be in Lennox and Addington, and I think affordable housing is different in all areas, but what is affordable housing?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So the definition we use is the same one that the province uses. And affordable housing is at market rate or 80% of the market rate. So basically 20% off. So if you think of a 1-bedroom apartment that's $1,000 on the market, we would consider anywhere from $1,000 to $800 a month to be affordable housing in that scenario.
Okay.
There's also just there that you're referencing. There's also what they call affordable home ownership, which means sort of the average market price to purchase a home. And I would agree with you when I see those numbers, and the province produces these. When I see those numbers, I kind of like my eyebrows go up, and I'm like, well, gee, I don't know if that's affordable to a lot of people. And obviously in Toronto it's way higher, Picton it's high, even in Napanee it's outside of what many people can afford, and definitely outside of what somebody earning minimum wage can afford.
Yeah, I agree. Now, just to follow up on that is, I know in Prince Edward County, you're not going to get an apartment for $1,000, like not even a 1-bedroom. You're looking at 1,500. You need a 2 or 3 bedroom. You're into between 2,000 and 3,000. I've heard stories where people are bidding to get that apartment, so they're overpaying. I think 3,000 or more. So if that apartment's going for 3,000, 80% of that is still way too high. So I'm just wondering, how do we address that, or do we?
Yeah, well, I'd like to address it by building a whole bunch of housing, because that would provide those opportunities. But unfortunately, that's a really expensive option. And part of the purpose for this housing needs study is so that we're ready to respond when there's financial partners in the province and feds, and federal government, when those opportunities come along. But you know, and I'll go to a different level of affordability with our rent geared to income housing, where people pay 30% of their income towards their rent. And that averages to be about $330, $350 a month for most of the people living in our housing. And then when I think of affordability, that's what I think of as true affordability. Because like you said, a $1,500 one bedroom apartment, so the person would get, for it to be affordable, they get $300 off that. So it's still $1,200, which is a really hard number to reach for a single person. Maybe a couple in a one bedroom, it's more achievable, but just $1,200 a month if you're working, even if you're working, you know, making $20, $25 an hour, and you have a car and maybe some kids, you know, it gets really, really tight.
Okay, Lynn?
If I could just add to that second part of the question about what we can do about the rents in the private market. Unfortunately, with the private market, it's all driven by availability and need and what they can get out of it. So there's really, I really don't think there's a lot that we can do on that end of things, because as a private owner, they're able to charge whatever they want to for rent, as long as they're meeting the provincial guidelines in terms of rent increases and those kinds of things. So I think really the long-term solution is unfortunately municipalities, and probably there's a few good Samaritan private individuals out there who will work towards building more affordable housing in terms of affordable rents and those kinds of things. And I think that's really the only way to battle this problem that's out there for sure.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, I think, and I could be wrong, but I thought in the last 4 years, the committee, it was brought to the committee to kind of have a land inventory for Pellis and put everything in place. Do we not already have a lot of this information? What lands we have, where they are, and you know, what needs we do need, based on the interactions we have with some of the clients coming in?
I can take that one.
Okay.
I think we know what we need. We really need all types of housing right across the spectrum, but we don't have anything tangible and documented to provide to a funder, whether it's the province or the federal governments, to actually draw funding out. So this step is a step to get a document that will say, this is what the service area needs. We have gone through the process of identifying potential properties and those kinds of things. But this document will then really be able to help us zero in on, okay, what do we need? Do we need a building lot that will accommodate 60 units? Do we need in this area, do we need 5 units? And in this area, do we need 10 units? So it really give us some direction and some concrete documentation when we're making funding applications to the province and to the federal government.
Okay, but can you just touch on, do we have the land inventory of what we have, where we have it? Do we not already have that?
Go ahead, Scott.
Sure. We have identified pieces of property, and it's like, there's a piece of property. Maybe we could do something there someday. And the hope with this is that we get it closer. Okay, what's the zoning? What could we put there? Wait, is that a wetland over there that we need to be careful, or do we need a setback? So right now it's kind of like, there's a piece of property, looks like we could do something. This would bring it to the next step. Like, we think we could put 12 units here. Here's where the parking would be. It's not zoned appropriately. So what would that take to get it? Is that a big thing to get it zoned appropriately, or a small thing? And the Pellis section has a plan to have a couple of shovel-ready pieces of property in the future, and this is just part of that. But it's kind of like, you know, we have a social housing property, for example, in Napanee, that's on a large piece of property, and it looks like you could build something pretty significant in behind it. This would get us from thinking that, yes, we could, to what could we build? What issues would be there in order to develop? So it would go down this street. Would a traffic study need to be done? Kind of looking at moving that further along the line. And again, just positioning ourselves in a way so we're ready to respond to other government funding when it comes along.
Okay, that's.
Does that answer your question?
I'm just
I don't know
wondering.
that I did.
No, that's good information, but do we not have a list with all the land that we have? Where what you just explained, we could put it into play, you know what I mean? So do we have the list that says these are the parcels of land that we have available to us?
I can take that. So we do have a list of lands that Lennox and Addington owns in Lennox and Addington County. That list is, there's lots of land. However, there's not, say, a lot of land in Loyalist Township or Addington Highlands Township, those kinds of things. So that this just allows us to really move it forward. We don't have a list of available lands for Prince Edward County, but we do for Lennox and Addington.
And so are we getting a list for Prince Edward County then? Or I guess we're, yeah, can we get that list for Prince Edward County, or how's that working? Scott?
Yeah, that would be part of this study, is they would work with Prince Edward County's planning department and identify parcels of land. You know, when we looked at this, for example, Lennox and Addington County has the county forest. It's a great big piece of property, but it's kind of in the middle of nowhere and maybe not where you'd want to necessarily build housing, although some of it goes in, gets close to Flinton. But usually, like some of the properties we have that the county owns are very isolated places where you want housing kind of close to people, close to services, close to where people can get food, and close to medical facilities and things like that. So this study would identify those pieces of property. And right now we've got them, like, here's a rectangle that looks like we might be able to build something. This would take it the next step. What could we build? What obstacles are in our path in between identifying property and having something on there? And obviously a big one is finances, but what's the zoning? Where would the services come in? How much would it cost to get this serviced? Maybe the land's already serviced, so that makes it more attractive because there's less costs and less issues to get that property up and going and have affordable housing there. So it's just sort of taking that next step from identifying property to looking at what we need to do to actually develop there.
Thank you. Councillor Wise?
Yes, thank you. Scott, it's been a while since I've read the report. I'm just scanning through it there while you're talking. When do we plan to issue the RFP? And once we get responses, when do we plan to award the contract?
Well, if committee approves it, later this afternoon, no, I'm kidding. If the committee approves it, then we move forward, and I would anticipate the RFP going out before the end of the month, and then awarding sometime in July. And then I've got my own ideas when it might be finished, but we will expect anybody responding to the RFP to give us kind of a timeline, how they envision the work going, and recognizing that the consultations we talked about earlier, probably summertime, not a good time to have those. So those would be happening in the fall. And I would just really rough guess, anticipate having something before the end of the year, a finished product.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Brenda?
I'm going to echo some of what I hear from some of the elected officials, because I was saying the same things to staff of, why do we have to do this? Like, don't we have this information? Can't we just pull it together ourselves? And the response that I got back from staff was, we have to be able to put it in a framework that the province and the feds will accept in order for grant funding, because they put it as one of the conditions of getting the money. So some of this is to help us get the money, and some of it is to help us make good decisions. One of the things I'm hoping to see out of this in terms of the consultation, and it's an avenue I think we need to explore better in both counties, is what not-for-profits out there are willing or have the capacity to work with us to be a player in this field. Because we can't, let's face it, our property tax dollars can't build to fill all the need. And the altruistic private sector, I mean, there might be the odd duck out there, but most of them are making a profit. Well, they're making hay while the sun shines. And I guess you can't blame them, that's private industry. But the not-for-profits, we might have some really stable ones that could be partners for us and players that might have land, or even the faith community. There might be a church that has a bigger piece of land, or they're willing to be a partner. We need to explore all of our not-for-profit and faith community options in terms of land. It's not just what do we own for our own lower tiers or county level or whatever. We have to explore other partners.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Ferguson, did you have your hand up?
I did just a couple of points. The Scott, the land inventory assessment is being done here, and that
Oh, great.
it's taken a while, and it's been done in various phases, but that information should be available pretty readily. I do understand Brenda's point about the making sure that the two Prince Edward County and Lennox and Addington have a rather seamless consultation process through the whoever is awarded the study. But please make our plan available to them, because it is we put targets into, I should say we, shouldn't say we, Chuck and Ellis did. And the CMHC has also indicated that it is acceptable, the plan is acceptable for funding. So please provide that to the consultant for their use.
Mr. Chair, through you to Mayor Ferguson. Yeah, of course, we have a number of supporting documents that we've already identified, and that would definitely be one of them because it's so recent. That'd be great. We have our housing and homelessness plan. We have a housing revitalization plan that was done a few years ago that's sort of looks at our existing social housing, community housing portfolio and opportunities that exist there. So we'll be making sure that they have all of that. We'll also be appealing to each township and our member municipalities to see if they have any information that they think would be particularly informative, be it there was a planned subdivision that didn't go through, but hey, it looked good over here, or any land or any other ideas they might have.
Is there any other questions? Seeing none. So I guess maybe this is for Beth. We're not receiving the report, or we're receiving it, but we're doing the recommendation also. Is that what we're doing?
Yes.
So is there a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Weiss and Councillor Fish, and I can read the recommendation, I guess. Excuse me. So that the May 26, 2023 staff report, affordable housing needs assessment manager, or be noted and received. And further, that Palace Committee approve issuing a request for proposal to conduct an affordable housing needs assessment. So is there any more comments on that? We have the mover and seconder. All in favor? And that carries. That moves us to number 2. The homeless prevention program. And that's Scott again.
Sure, Mr. Chair, to you and the rest of the committee. It's actually really exciting news. Last year through this program, the homelessness prevention program, we received about $1,090,300. And this year we've got a significant boost at $2,454,600. So that's great. And we use this funding for a huge number of initiatives. A big one is preventing homelessness in the first place, because if you can prevent homelessness, then it doesn't happen. It's great. So this goes to like rent arrears, utility disconnects. We'll pay for that. Sometimes we pay for even vehicle repairs if people need that vehicle to get to work. So it goes to that. It also goes to a number of our community organizations. So it goes to places like the Morning Star Mission, Salvation Army. It goes to community people working in the community to help address homelessness. It also funds our very successful transitional housing program. We have 11 homes with 39 people who move from the street into those housing units. So it pays for a great number of initiatives, and having more than double what we had last year will only help us identify places to focus on. You'll see one of the things we need to do in this report. There's 4 different categories: supportive housing, community outreach and support services, housing assistance, and emergency shelter solutions. The province has asked us to split the money into those 4 silos or 4 program contents. And so we've done that. And that's what we have before you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions? Councillor Fish?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Scott, I had a question on performance indicators, and it's more of a general question. And are there targets built into what we have to achieve through this program? I mean, I've read it, but I just didn't quite grasp whether there are specific targets in there.
No, Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Fritsch. No, there are. The province doesn't set targets. It's one of the great things about this funding is they provide it to us, and they don't really directly. It has to be, there's a realm of services. There's a limit to what you can do, but it's kind of, they let each service manager decide where to target that money. And we're targeting it a little more. I would like to target it a little more this year to sort of homelessness solutions rather than homelessness management. But you have to manage it as well. You can't just have people on the streets and unassisted. So we strive to do both of those things, sort of to manage it and to provide opportunities that will solve homelessness.
Okay, just a follow-up
Sure.
question. Yeah, a quick question. So then, do you have to report though on these different indicators?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So
We have to report on how many people were, for example, how many people were about to be homeless, were at risk of being homeless that you helped. How many homeless people did you help? There's a category called the by name list that is a different category of homelessness. We have to report on that and report on any sort of emergency housing programs that we operated or funded and how many people were using those programs.
okay, thank you.
Yes, and so we had to do that for last year, and hopefully by the next committee meeting, I'll have a summary of those activities, and people will be able to see where that money was directed and how many people we helped out.
Okay, Councillor Wise?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So that's a a great increase in funding. Do you anticipate you'll be able to provide the additional services this funding represents with existing staff, or would this require hiring contract staff or employing outside agencies? Just how do you foresee the resources being utilized with in terms of staffing?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councilor Wise, we don't anticipate adding any staff at the Pellis level, but we do anticipate community agencies adding staff, and that's generally how this funding is kind of distributed across the province with all service managers. So we have a number of community agencies that are already working with homeless people who are sitting there thinking, wouldn't it be great if we had a person who could do X? And then they will respond to our expression of interest and say, here's something we're already either doing or we're sort of doing, but it could be way better if we had a staff person, or it would be way better for, one of my favorites is the Hub in Prince Edward County, where they specialize in providing nutritious meals to new moms, expecting moms, but especially babies. So whenever I think of awarding money to them, I somehow feel I'm feeding babies, but I know I'm not directly, but it's a great program. And without homelessness prevention program funding, they wouldn't be able to have as large an impact as they have. They'd still be doing their good work, but it's just with more funding, they can do even better work. So mostly, Councilor Wise sort of summarize that, mostly it would be community agencies adding staff or adding products and adding services.
That's great. Thank you.
And I will just add one other thing, even though we said thank you, that we already have a great network of community agencies that we work with and have partnered with for a few years. So I expect those to continue and maybe even be enhanced, and they'll grow a bit, giving our additional funding.
Thank you, Councilor Brandahurst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report is great, and but one area I have a few questions, but I don't mind sharing the floor with others. One of my questions is, what were the 11 houses that were referenced in the supportive housing section?
Yeah, so those are our transitional home housing program. So those are there's 11 homes with 39 bedrooms, and we move people basically right from the street into those homes and get them settled, adjusted to living, a term we use is living on the inside rather than the outside, and get them ready to move out into either the private market or into subsidized housing, community housing that we operate, and to be successful living on their own and to have successful tenancies, some of whom haven't had that for years and years.
And where are they located?
Oh, there are 10 in Napanee and 1 in Picton. And one of my goals with this funding would be to increase the Picton contingent, even though housing is expensive. And those houses we rent from private landlords who are agreeable to. We are upfront. We tell them who we're going to house there, and not everybody's okay with that. But we've got a few landlords who have said they're okay with that, and they don't manage the tenants. We move people in, we manage them, we get the rent, we manage their behaviors. So it's just the physical structure that the landlords have to provide. They don't have to, and general maintenance, but they don't have to manage the behavior of the people there. We have, it's actually Pellis staff and some of those community agencies I was talking about that assist us with that.
Thank you. Can I keep
Yep.
going?
Yep, go ahead.
That's okay. Thank you. I was curious about how did staff break down the amount of money into the different categories? Because some of the categories seem a little heavier than others. And I was just wondering, how did that get broken down?
Sure. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councilor Brandahurst. It's based on, part of it's based on our historical expenditures in those different categories. And some of it's based on where we'd like to direct funding. And as I mentioned earlier, I'd like to direct more of it towards solutions to homelessness rather than just managing homelessness. For example, the Morning Star mission is a fantastic place. I've been there a couple of times. They help a tremendous number of homeless people, and not just homeless people, people who are living on their own, who have to choose, am I paying rent or am I buying food? So they can get their food at the Morning Star mission. It's a super organization. They provide clothing, winter wear, but Morning Star admittedly doesn't solve homelessness. They help manage homelessness. So we're kind of pushing some of it towards, but we have a program going on in Picton or in Prince Edward County right now, where there's a community agency that has a staff member who's meeting with homeless people, finds them housing. It's usually a room, moves them in there, provides all the supports they need to have that tenancy operate effectively. And then when somebody moves in, they need a lot of support, but as time goes on, they need less support. So they help them so that they can learn and understand what they need to do to have a successful tenancy. And I really like that program because it's permanent housing. And no, not that that person's going to live there till they're 90, but there's no end date. Like a shelter has an end date. Lots of different places have an end date. Even, alternatives for women, it's 1 year, but there's an end date to that. So this is housing without an end date. As long as the person makes it work, they can stay there. And that's a program I'm really in favor of, and I'd like to see replicated across Lennox and Addington as well.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. It really does sound amazing. Can I ask one more, Mr. Chair? Or
Sure.
does anybody else want another round of questions before I just keep going?
No, go ahead.
Okay, perfect, thank you. I feel like I'm putting you on the hot seat, Scott, and I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's fine.
I just want to try and figure this all out in my head. The only other question I had was around the emergency shelters. In the beginning of the report, in like the section of the breakdown of money, there was the section saying that warming centers are included in that. And yet later on in the report, it says that to consider or to be classified for emergency shelters, that there has to be a bed. And not all warming centers have beds. So I'm just wondering, like, is that an oversight or is there something I'm missing?
No,
Just like a little clarification.
yeah, Mr. Chair, through you to Council Branderhorst and the rest of the committee. No, there is a difference. A warming center usually doesn't have a bed or overnight accommodation. There's actually a different level of usually fire safety that needs to be met if people are sleeping there and things like that. So there is a distinction between them, but we would definitely, this funding could be used to fund a warming center. And I don't want to be preemptive, but I would assume Morning Star Mission is still interested in providing that work, and we would be interested in providing funds to allow them to continue to do their good work. Sorry, did that answer your question? I don't think it did.
Yeah, not really.
Okay.
I guess I'm wondering if a warming center would fall in a different category because it's not really an emergency shelter solution. So I guess I'm just wondering, should it be in a different category or where maybe more funds are available?
I think Lynn wants to answer that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's probably just a terminology issue. So when we've referenced warming centers, we're actually referencing the idea of what Morningstar is offering. And they are zoned and set up to offer overnight accommodation, but they call themselves a warming center. They don't call themselves an emergency shelter. So they're providing an emergency shelter services, not just a warming center for people to come in and get warm and then leave. So they're actually providing the shelter piece. So it's probably just, it's a language thing, if that helps. Councillor Branderhorst.
Thank you, Lynn.
I do have a quick follow-up to that. Yeah,
Sure.
that does help a bit just because I am worried it is a lower allocation funds, like it's around 12% of the money that was allotted goes to the emergency shelters. And I think specifically from the deputations I have heard in our community, and I'm sure Lennox and Addington would be feeling the same. There's a big need for emergency housing, and if there are, I don't want to eliminate certain shelters in either area or warming centers, depending on the terminology they use, from being able to obtain more funding. That's not the purpose. I guess I would hate to see that those limited funds not going to them, if that makes more sense. Like I think Morningstar and the work that they're doing is fantastic in other areas. So I'd like to see that money go to them without going to maybe an area that could be considered more of a warming center. Like within Prince Edward, we just opened up our during the Christmas freeze, we just opened up some of our town hall buildings to be considered a warming center, and we ate those costs. I think that makes more sense. Sorry.
Len?
I think so. The warming centers that you opened up over Christmas, they're not really designed as an emergency shelter. I think the winter, that was a place for people to come in to be warm, so they wouldn't be able to access this funding. But if how we came with the $200,000 number was based on previous allocations through HPP and also the Social Services Relief Fund. So last year we were able to allocate $200,000 towards warming centers out of between the Homelessness Prevention Program and the SSRF. So as we know, the SSRF has gone away. But however, the province has increased our homelessness prevention program funding, which kind of balances it out. So that's where that came from. And in last year's allocation, it was allocated for $100,000 for Lennox and Addington and $100,000 for Prince Edward County. The Prince Edward County Warming Center or emergency shelter wasn't able to proceed. So those funds then were allocated to other areas of the HPP. So it still leaves kind of the same amount of money that we had last year towards the emergency shelter solutions.
So I'll come
Sorry.
back to you.
Can I just have a clarifying point?
Sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Lynn. I guess what I was trying to say was I agree that money shouldn't go to like what we did in the wintertime, but more to what you were saying. So that actually eases my mind, just what you said. Thank you. I'm good.
You're welcome.
Is there anybody else has a question? No? Okay, I have a couple. So I just want to go with the warming center. So we have Morningstar and Napanee. But in Prince Edward County, I think over the last bit of time, we've been trying to get one there, but it's kind of, I think, and I could be wrong on this, but I think what we've been trying to do is push everybody to Salvation Army and put them in motels. And I think that's a limited stay. I believe it was a 3-night maximum. Is that rings a bell for me, but I could be wrong on that. So I'm just wondering, for the warming center, are we trying to get one in place in Prince Edward County? And how far along are we on that? And then how much money is spent on the motels in each area? Lynn, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a number as to what we're spending on motels, but I do know that with the Salvation Army, the way it's set up in Picton right now is they'll authorize up to 3 days. Generally, that happens if someone contacts them on a Friday. They would then authorize Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night with a referral to our Pellis office. And so then that person then on Monday would then come in, see our staff. we would work with them to figure out what options that there may be available. And then if necessary, then our staff would then authorize additional motel room stays. We wouldn't send them back to the Salvation Army to do that. So the person could actually be in a motel for longer than the 3 days. But the Salvation Army would do the 3 days to allow them time to get in contact with our office. And then our staff would work with them to try and figure out, okay, what are our next steps? Do you have family that you can stay with? Do you have friends you can stay with? You know, are you needing last month's rent, but you've got a place lined up? All of those kinds of questions. So we would work with them to do that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that part of it.
Okay.
The other part is, are we actively trying to set up a warming center in Prince Edward County? And if we are, how far along are we? And in my mind, right now is the time to get all that groundwork done so that when the cold weather hits, we're not sitting here having this same conversation. We already have it. So I'm just wondering where we are with that.
So Pellis doesn't operate the warming centers at all. So what will happen, what we did last year, and we'll probably do again, is we'll put out an expression of interest, looking for agencies that may be wanting to set one up. And then we would go through that process and back to Pellis committee.
But we offer funding to the warming centers, right?
We offer funding, but we don't organize. Yeah.
Right. So I'm just trying to, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, I know we had the Morning Star in Napanee, and I'm just trying to figure out, you know, how we get something in Prince Edward County, but it sounds like we have to, council has to actively, or staff has to pursue that. Is that correct? Or Brenda?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to tie it back to my previous comment on the other issue with, I think in general, we need to do a better job connecting with our not-for-profits and our faith communities, because I see that they are the partners that we can work with to create warming centers, shelters, affordable housing projects. And I'm hoping through that previous RFP that you've approved, that dialogue can begin with those. I think the hiccup for Prince Edward County last winter, and Scott, Lynn, correct me if I'm wrong, was just that the partner was not able to meet the requirements. I think there was zoning issues and building code issues and some certain things. So certainly if they're working on that now for next winter, and it has the support of council, and they put in a request for the funding to make those things happen, then hopefully they're in a point where they can be a player and a partner this next winter. It's just unfortunate that they couldn't make all the ducks align for themselves in terms of the zoning and the planning and the structural things that they needed to do. But I think as we do a better job of connecting with our other partners in the community, I think we'll have better luck on a number of these issues.
Okay, thank you. I do have one other question. I read in there on page 67, hospital visits and visiting the justice system is in decline when people have stable housing and stuff. I'm just wondering, do we have numbers that back up that observation? Because that observation was in the report that you need for an investment plan. I'm just wondering, do we have numbers to back that up? And how confident are you in that investment plan that we're handing in to get this money?
Yeah, it's, I think anything we can do, all of the services we provide to help homeless people, when we have community agencies with staff out on the street addressing homelessness issues, that means the police aren't involved or don't have to be involved. Or actually a measure we're taking now is working with the police as a partner. So rather than, the police have an incident with a homeless person at midnight, they arrest that person. And in the past, it's been like, okay, so it's 7 or 8 o'clock, the person gets out of jail and off they go. And the police in Napanee, and they're right across from our building. And one guy said, I'm watching the guy walk out of our parking lot, and I'm thinking there has to be a better option. So we're actually taking a few steps to improve coordination and communication about homelessness services, and it's starting to have a positive impact already. And the more that we can intervene, if somebody's unhealthy, and get them, medical attention sooner, rather than, the feet with homeless people are usually bad. You think of a person who's been on the street, it's February, their feet haven't been dry since October. They go to the hospital, they can't walk. Sometimes they have an extended stay. That's just an example, but our goal would be to get that person assistance sooner, or even instruct them on self-care, so that they avoid going to the hospital, and so that they've got mechanisms in place to avoid causing trouble that gets them arrested and through the judicial system, because the jail is a terrible place to deal with for people to address addictions and mental health issues. So we're trying to steer them away from those areas.
Okay, thank you. Lynn?
If I could also add to, I think in terms of the numbers or the data to back that up, we don't have anything specific. However, with our transitional unit tenants, we have had conversations with the police that their interactions with those people have significantly decreased. And we've also, just from a general perspective, have noticed an improvement in their health as well, which is also resulting in fewer hospital stays. It's very, very hard to quantify that though. So it's really general observations in terms of how people are progressing, feeling, working, and in conversations with other agencies.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Ferguson, did you have a question? You're on mute.
I know. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Not a question, clarification for Brenda, that the warming center, well, let's call him candidate, I think is completed the work to be able to move forward for next year.
That's great news.
Just
That
as
is
an
good.
FYI.
Great news.
Scott?
If I could just note, if you look in that document, emergency shelter solutions, we have $300,000 in there, and we believe that's enough to fund a warming center in Lennox and Addington and another one in Prince Edward County. So that's why that number is there. We wanted to make sure we had enough to fund 2 operations.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions? Councilor Branderhurst?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering if we would be able to have like a further breakdown of this report. I know this is probably just the beginning of everything, and I was just wondering to see on how the different areas break down between the 2 municipalities, and if we could see maybe where some of the community outreach, kind of where the money is going between our 2 municipalities, and also like the housing assistance, kind of the breakdowns, and see where it's going. I think it just helps us as leaders of our community to do a better job, know where it's going, know who's getting supported, seeing how we can better assist our communities. I don't know if you disagree with that, but I think it would be really helpful.
Sam, did you want to respond? Or
Sure. Unless Lynn
Sure, I can respond to that. We
Okay.
can bring a report for sure with that breakdown. So what we could do is we could bring the breakdown for 2022-23, that March to March period of what we did last year. And then it's hard to do throughout the year because we don't spend all the money at once, but we certainly can bring that back on a yearly basis to show what the breakdown is from the different categories and the payments that we're issuing to keep people housed, emergency shelters, community agencies, all of those kinds of things. So we can certainly bring that back.
I think it would be really neat to be able to see that. So thanks, Lynn and Scott. I appreciate that.
thank you. Is there any other questions? No, okay. So the recommendation then is that May 26, 2023 staff report homeless prevention program be noted and received, and further that the homeless prevention program investment plan be approved by the Pellis Committee, and further that staff be authorized to reallocate program funds between the program components in response to local needs and to ensure full utilization of the allocations. Is there a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Branderhorst and Councillor Fish. Any other questions or comments on it? All in favor? Carried. That moves us to number 3.
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
sorry to interrupt. Something's come up and I have to leave. I apologize for that. I know, I think Mayor Ferguson said he had to leave at 11. Does that leave you with a quorum?
Yeah, I think so. I think Mayor had to leave at 11:30.
Oh,
Yeah.
11:30. Okay, sorry. Didn't mean to put words in your mouth there, Scott. I unfortunately do have to go. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, John. That's number 3, the National Housing Strategy. And I guess Scott again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully you're not getting tired of listening to me, but this one's good news as well. We have money through a couple different programs through the Canada Ontario Community Housing Initiative and the Ontario Priorities Housing Initiative and the Canada Ontario Housing Benefit. So these are 3 different program funds that where we got their channels where we got funding last year, and we're receiving funding again this year. And this just talks about what would like to do with this. The Canada Ontario Housing Benefit, or the COHB, or as it's known, the COB program, is basically a rent supplement program. It's a little different in that all of our other rent supplement programs are tied to a unit. You rent that unit, you get a rent sub. This program is tied to the person. So if the person gets, $500 towards their rent, that goes wherever they go. They could live in Napanee, they could live in Picton, they could even move to Sarnia, and they still get that money. So it's tied to the person, so that it's portable, which is good. The Canada Ontario Community Housing Initiative, that's to help us make up for former federal housing providers that have left the system. So we've developed rent supplement agreements with them to keep those affordable housing units in the system. That money will also be used for capital repairs, which help keep our costs down and helps keep those buildings in shape and operational. And then the other fund, the Ontario Priorities Housing Initiative, we're recommending to spend about half of that in the Ontario Renovates program and about half of it in a home repair program. Ontario Renovates, people are eligible to get up to $25,000 to do repairs to their home that otherwise they would need to move out or lose their home. And the home repair program provides up to $5,000 to allow somebody to remain in their home. So a lot of that goes to, we cover a lot of ramped access into a home, allows somebody to stay there who's either in a walker or wheelchair. It goes to furnace repairs, roof repairs. Sometimes we're pumping out a septic tank for a low-income homeowner. And that's what those funds are designated for.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Frisch?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, a comment and then a question. My comment is a general one. To actually work in social services, you need an entire index of acronyms, and certainly members of council, I probably need one written beside me to keep track of what's going on when I'm reading stuff in preparation for a meeting, because it's a whole different language out there. Anyway, the question I have is on tied to sort of this home repair, I don't call it grant, or the Ontario Renovates one, the 5,000 or the 25,000 one, depending on who you are, who's applying. How do you actually, in real life, I guess, interact with potential people who are taking up on this program? How does that work? Like, is it an advertising, or do you know who's in the category eligible and you talk to them, or how does that actually work?
I believe last year, and I wasn't here, so I'll look for Lynn for clarification. I think we informed our member municipalities, and they were aware through their kind of bylaw inspectors, building inspectors, kind of were aware of some people who might benefit from the program. And I think that's how we attracted people to the program last year. And we did a number of great things. There's a woman who had a really outdated electrical panel, making her house unsafe and making, building officials feel that she was at risk and fire officials feel we're at risk. We replaced the panel. It's updated. She's safe. She's able to live there. Otherwise, she would have had to leave, and I don't know where she would have ended up, kind of thing. So that was one of the ones that was, that on the interior renovations. We actually, I think, also repaired the roof and a few other things that allowed her to continue to enjoy living in her home. And Lynn was here, so I'll let her comment more on how we attracted people to that program.
And last year, and we would do the same this year, we also put an expression of interest out to the general public as well. So people could apply, provide information. They would have to supply estimates, show proof of income to show that they're low income, all of those kinds of things, and go through the eligibility criteria. And that gets it out to the general public.
Okay. Thank you. And so is there a specific time of year that you normally do that?
I believe it was released in July of last year. So
Okay.
if this is approved, then we would then work on getting that expression of interest out so that people have time to get repairs completed, especially before winter falls, if it's a roof as an example. So if this is approved by committee, then we would then go to the next steps, issuing an expression of interest.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, Councilor Branderhorst?
Is there a way, and maybe this won't be effective, but is there a way that we could have, I don't know, something compiled with appropriate language that we could share over social media or email news feeds, or ways to hit constituents that might not be following the certain avenues, just so we can better hit as many people as possible?
I know that last year, the expression of interest, it does include kind of all the legalese stuff and the eligibility criteria, which is not, there's not a lot that we can do with that. But it did provide information in plain language. And we would also provided it to, I believe it was sent out to lower tiers. It was posted on Facebook, different social media sites. And we can also share it with our community partners as well. And then they can make sure that, the people that they're interacting with are aware of it as well.
Okay, thank you.
Scott, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, through you, to you and to the rest of the committee, I should add that with the Ontario Renovates program, if somebody were to get $25,000, it's a 10-year forgivable loan. So it's actually, there's a requirement to attach that loan to the deed of your house, kind of thing. And then if you are still there 10 years from now, you don't owe us anything. But if somebody sold their home within 5 years, they'd kind of have to pay about half of that back. And it's a graduated, it's less each year, but so there's some commitment. So it can't just be a cheap way to renovate and then sell your house.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Okay, so the recommendation would be that the May 26, 2023 staff report regarding national housing strategy, Scott Robertson, be noted and received, and further that the investment plans for the national housing strategy initiatives be approved by the Pellis Committee, and further that staff be authorized to reallocate programming funds between the program components in response to local needs and to ensure is that the right one? Yeah. Yep. Full utilization of allocations. Mover and a second on that. Warden Hogg and Councilor Branderhorst. No other questions or comments? All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Thanks, Scott. I don't think you're doing the next one.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and the rest of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. That moves us to matters for information, the Pellis performance metrics, and it's Kent. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. This report is to provide an update on the performance metrics at Pellis. Pellis had a decrease in the Ontario Works caseload from March to April. The caseload currently sits at 794 cases. There was a slight decrease in the number of applications received in April compared to March, with both months receiving more than 50 applications. The number of clients in the caseload reporting paid employment increased by less than a percentage in April. The average number of days clients spent on assistance has started to increase since the beginning of January. The province has seen similar trends as Pellis in their performance metrics as well. Within children's services, the number of fee subsidy applications received in March and April were lower compared to the applications received in 2022 for the same months. The number of children supported through fee subsidy decreased in April compared to March, ending with a total of 168 children and 98 households being supported. Housing Services placed 8 households in rent geared income housing over the past 2 months. Pellis has received an average of 28 housing applications per month since the beginning of 2023. And Pellis currently has 155 occupied rent supplement units. I'd be happy to take any questions on the performance metrics at this time.
Is there any questions? Councillor Frisch?
Yes. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah. And I can't bring it up right now. I did just before the meeting, but the by name list, when you look at it, I just go by memory here. From the last year, there was a drop of, I don't know, maybe 20 or something. I don't have that in front of me. So is that due to the success of the program, or is there an explanation why that's dropping? I mean, it's good that it's dropping, but
if I can add, so there's a lot of reasons for someone exiting from the by name list. So it could be that we've lost contact with them. So maybe they've moved out of the municipality. Maybe they've secured a housing and aren't looking for supports from Pellis. Some of the people that are in, so the individuals that are in our transitional units, so they're no longer on the street, but they're in our transitional units. Those people are still included on our transitional, or sorry, on our by name list, because they are still in a transitory accommodation type. So they're not permanently housed. So those people continue to stay on our list. We are working on moving towards a qualitative list, is what the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness is terming it. And that is really, we're working to improve communications and coordination between all of the community partners so that we're really connecting and they're connecting with people. So we have individuals on the by name list who they've consented to be on the by name list. They've consented to work with their agency to on whatever their issues are. So what's been happening is sometimes the person has still been homeless or precariously housed, and they're working with the community agency, but that community agency is not necessarily keeping us up to date as to what the status of that person is. So after 3 months, when we've had no contact with that person or not been able to reach them, they fall off the by name list. So we're trying to really work on that whole communication piece between the different organizations so that we're not losing people. But it also does speak to what we've been able to do with transitional housing. And we've actually had some people move from transitional housing into permanent housing. So then they would come off the by name list at that point in time. So there's lots and lots of different reasons. And we're still continuing to try to improve communication between the different partners so that we're able to work with everybody, find out what's happening, make sure that they're getting the services that they need. I hope that answers your question.
well, yes, it does. It answers the question, because that's what I was thinking. In prior to this meeting is, and what you're getting at is the accuracy of the by name list, and is it accurate, accurately representing the people that are out there, because some don't want to be on it, and some are just sort of out of the radar, right? So you're trying to manage that program, I mean, for the betterment of every individual out there, and hopefully they I guess, get on a better road, right? But it's, yeah, it's the sort of quote, the general accuracy of it and the trend of it decreasing in some instances isn't a good thing because they've just disappeared. You don't know where they are, but in other cases, it is a good thing.
Exactly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have one, and I might have missed it, but the wait list for getting help or getting homes, I guess. What's the wait list now, and what's the number of people, clients waiting?
Yeah,
It's
through you,
current-
Mr.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kent.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, I think the current number is over 1,000, just over 1,000, 1,006, 1,016 currently.
2016, and so if you're number 1,000, how long are you waiting? 5 years?
I can take that one, Kent. Really, it depends on the type of unit that the person has applied for, whether it's a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, and it also depends on the number of places that they've applied to. So if somebody applies for rent geared to income housing and they only want to live on Mary Street, and that's the only place that they applied to, their wait could be longer than if they had applied to multiple buildings or options, because family units, as an example, people tend to stay in the family units longer. So there's not the turnover necessarily. So it really, really depends. And which is why we don't like to say, you know, it's 3 to 5 years, because it really can depend. We also have the special priority status, which can impact buildings as well. So someone who's been a victim of domestic violence, they go to the top of the list, and that's a provincially mandated requirement of our housing wait list. So if, as an example, they would pop to the top, which means those people who are on the existing list are not moving up very well or very quickly.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Nope. Okay, so I just gotta get back to that. Let's see. So the recommendation is that May 25th, 2023 staff report regarding Pellis performance metrics, Kent Togger be noted and received. A mover and a seconder for that. Warden Hogg, Councillor Frisch. Any questions or comments? All in favor? That carries. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ken. That will move us to adjournment. Can I have a mover and a seconder on that? Mayor Ferguson and Councillor Frisch.